Change the relationship that you have with the burnout, with the dissatisfaction, with the stress, with the overwhelm. Instead of seeing it as an obstacle preventing you from having the life that you want, see it as an invitation inviting you to explore the deeper internal aspects of yourself.
What stops us from doing the things that we know we need to be doing in order to move through this discomfort then?
The nervous system. Even if the change is good for us, it views the change as a threat. Because when you look at change, what comes with it? It comes with an inherent uncertainty. With uncertainty, there is an inherent vulnerability. Your nervous system is coming online saying, let's stay in what is familiar until we can actively disrupt the pattern. I was taught to believe that my performance in life determines my measure of acceptance in this world. My stats were no longer just numbers on a piece of paper. My stats were a definition of my worth. Scoring touchdowns, it wasn't something that you did or did not do. It was who I was or who I was not.
Do you feel that you're enough now? Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. We live in a world that's moving faster than ever. The pressure to keep up, to achieve, and to look like we have it all together for our families and our teams is immense. And it can often lead to burnout and a life constantly spent chasing the next thing, only to feel that we're still not enough. My guest today knows this pressure intimately. Caleb Campbell was once known as America's athlete, a West Point graduate, an Army officer, and an NFL linebacker. He had built a seemingly perfect life, the ultimate scaffolding of success. But in an instant, a sudden policy change erased his NFL dream, and that entire scaffolding collapsed. That collapse, that divine ambush, as he calls it, sent him on a profound journey from the NFL to a janitor's closet in Canada to dismantle the belief that his performance determined his acceptance. In this conversation, Caleb gives us a powerful new framework for navigating pressure. We talk about why we resist the very changes that are good for us, how to stop building our lives on the back of willpower, and instead learn, as he terms it, to rest in the river. You're going to hear his touching story and get some really insightful tools for building awareness in moments of stress and for unlocking the conviction needed to move from a life of survival to one of true purpose. That's coming right up here on The Edge of Possible. Caleb, good to see you, man.
My guy, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure seeing you too, man. We're at a really interesting time. I think that's an understatement, I think, right now, right? The world's moving faster than ever.
Yeah.
People are trying to keep up. I'm definitely in this camp myself, yet burnout isn't at an all-time high. Just the pressure of life, both personally and professionally, I think can feel like a lot. And when you add into the mix, people relying on you, whether that's family or team at work, relying on you to somehow have it all together, that's a lot. How do we go about navigating this? What's the number one thing that you tell people?
My gosh, starting out small, aren't we? No, I love it. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? It's a very interesting time. And the thing about it is the world is not going to slow down. And so I think that the way in which we play the game has to change. And I think for so many of us, especially high achievers, high performers, or people inside of leadership roles, whether that's inside of an organization or at home, they're dealing with expectations coming from every angle of their life, constantly trying to measure up and be who they think they need to be in order to succeed or in order to do well. And they can play that game well, but at some point, right, the burnout, it comes knocking on your heart's door, or the dissatisfaction after a long, prosperous day of work and feeling like you're still empty or that it's not enough. There's some sort of internal, discomfort that begins surfacing in our lives. And I think the one thing that I tell people often is to change the relationship that you have with the internal discomfort. Change the relationship that you have with the burnout, with the dissatisfaction, with the angst, with the anxiety, with the stress, with the overwhelm. Instead of seeing it as an obstacle preventing you from having the life that you want, see it as an invitation inviting you to explore the deeper internal aspects of yourself so that you can evolve and emerge out on the other side of it, a new creation, somebody new. These things are not obstacles in their way, right? They are the way that we can expand our internal capacity so that we can move through the next season of life that will also be full of complexity in its own rightful way. But we can do it in a way where we don't collapse. We can do it in a way where we don't lose ourselves in the process because we have become somebody new by seeing all of this internal discomfort as the invitation to expand. And so changing your relationship, changing your posture towards how you are in relationship with the internal discomfort, it's paramount.
It's easier said than done, right? Because, I mean, it's the same as we all know that we need to be exercising, eating good food, getting good sleep. Like, what stops us from doing the things that we know we need to be doing in order to move through this discomfort then? Like, how do we go about that?
That's a beautiful question. And I think there are surface answers and there's a deeper answer. And for me, as I look at the history of my life in relationship with these practices, or, changing my posture towards the internal discomfort of my life, the deeper answer for me is the most important one. I think a lot of reasons why we fail to actually follow through on the changes that we know are necessary and needed that would actually make us feel good is a game around the nervous system. And what we have to understand is that our nervous system, that more specifically the autonomic nervous system, the part of us that obviously is in charge of all of the automatic functioning that allows us to continue to be in our lives, but also the part of us that houses our survival, our protection mechanisms, that fight, flight, or freeze, it views change. Even if the change is good for us, it views the change as a threat. Because when you look at change, what comes with it? Change, it comes with an inherent uncertainty. With uncertainty, there is an inherent vulnerability. Vulnerability, it means that you are being exposed. You're risking losing it all. You're just risking. And so your nervous system is coming online saying, hey, Caleb, I hear you. You want to make some good changes in your life, but that is wildly unfamiliar, full of uncertainty, and there is an inherent vulnerability in there. And so we're going to go ahead and keep you safe by allowing you to just relapse a little bit and choose the things that are more self-protective and familiar, even though it's creating some chaos in your life. And so one of my favorite teachers, Bill Plotkin, he calls them loyal soldiers. Right? We have these parts of us that are loyal soldiers, and loyal soldiers derives from World War II, when a bunch of fighter pilots were, shot down over World War I. Forgive me. A bunch of fighter pilots were shot down over an island, and they weren't rescued for about 3 to 4 years. And when they were rescued, they immediately wanted to return back to war, failing to recognize that the war was over. And so I love that analogy because we have a bunch of loyal soldiers inside of us that have failed to recognize that the war is over. Meaning, we have a bunch of loyal soldiers that are only here to keep us safe and to protect us. And so anytime we start inching towards the land of growth and transformation, which requires vulnerability, which requires authenticity, which opens ourselves up, we can be wounded. We can be deeply wounded because back when we were younger, or we've had other traumatic experiences in our young adult lives, we had experiences where we were open and we were wounded. And so loyal soldiers come online and says, I'm going to protect you from that ever happening again. I'm going to crystallize your heart. I'm going to harden your heart. I'm not going to allow anybody to get close to you ever again. And so these loyal soldiers come online when we are on the edge of that threshold of growth. And they say, no, 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 let's stay in what is familiar and what is comfortable. And a lot of that is our unconscious programming, our habitual patterns, those neural pathways that we have in our lives that keep us going down the same road until we can actively disrupt the pattern.
Let's talk about disrupting the pattern then.
Yeah.
And I think a great way to do this is you've been through many of these evolutions in your life, right? From the NFL to maybe things beforehand, to after that, to then moving into the work that you're doing now. Let's talk about how you've actually gone about it, because I think there's real value in witnessing the challenge, the disruption that occurs, and then it's not a clean move to the next stage. There are things that occur, there's stuff that comes up. It's messy at times. So let's go back. When did these disruptions, if you will, happen for you?
Yeah. The Western culture is really largely void of rites of passages, right? And there are no longer necessarily rites of passages that allow young adult adolescent psyches to go out, have an experience, and to, transform and then return back to community with a new adult psyche, an active participant of community. And because there are a largely absent and void, or our culture is largely absent and void of rites of passage, life becomes the initiator. Life becomes the disruption that can thrust us into these kind of, in their own special way, rites of passages that can transform us from the inside out so that we can grow. Because right now, it doesn't take long for us to look around, Cameron, and see that there are a lot of adults running around screaming like little boys and little girls, right? They maybe have grown in age, but their psyches are stuck in a childlike posture. And again, it doesn't take us long to look around, especially through the landscape of politics, to see that playing out on full display. And so life becomes an initiator. And man, I can remember, experiences as young as 6 or 7 years old, and then I can imagine experiences of leaving just high school and going to West Point, and then that being a massive disruption because it was a collision of identities. I was raised in an evangelical Christian home, where God always had a plan for my life, and serving God was the utmost priority of my life. And I wasn't somebody that would drink. I wasn't somebody that would curse. I wasn't somebody that would sleep around. I did my best to live a very devoted and devout life, serving the Christian faith. And throughout high school, that created so much traumatic experiences in my life where, I remember when I wrote my first suicide note. I was a junior in high school. I had just been inducted into the Texas High School Football Hall of Fame. I was All-State for 2 years in a row. I was being scouted as one of the top players in the state of Texas in my position. Like on the outside, life was looking really good, but internally, I was just absolutely broken because it just seemed like no matter how much I did or no matter what I achieved, I was just always alone. And so I lived with that deep, deep loneliness in my body. And then when I got the scholarship to go play at the United States Military Academy at West Point, I immediately went to West Point and I kind of said to myself, I'm going to do whatever it is to fit in. I'm going to do whatever it takes to belong. And so I threw so much of my upbringing out the window and I conformed to society so that I could become somebody that was accepted and loved. And that was a massive disruption in my life. And even though I didn't have the awareness of it at the time, I wasn't as conscious as I am now. There was a betrayal of self. A betrayal of self that created such incongruency in my life that I would live from for several years that would then lead me into a lot of experiences and battles with depression and panic attacks and thoughts of suicide ideation. And these were all experiences from life inviting me to expand, inviting me to be initiated so that I could work through these internal challenges and emerge out on the other side as somebody new, right? But again, I didn't have the awareness to navigate that journey. And so I resisted and resisted. And a lot of what keeps us from stepping over that threshold and expanding what's possible in our lives is an unwillingness to tell the truth. And in this season of my life, I lived with the facade. I had from the outside looking in all together at all the times, but internally I just was an imposter. I was a fraud. And that pressure, it built and built and built in my life. And yeah, I'll stop there. I mean, I can go back to experiences time and time again, and it never fails when I can look back at them while in these experiences, while in these disruptions. It truly feels like life is ending. It's like I don't know how I'm going to emerge out on the other side of this, and there is actually a good chance that I do not. And somehow, and this is what I call grace, there is a invitation to surrender, an invitation to let go, and you do emerge out on the other side, and you emerge out as someone that was much larger than who entered into that scenario.
Well, it seems this was a big one for you there was this need to be accepted.
Yeah, it's massive.
This need to belong. There was this need to fit in. To be able to go from the need to fit in to then being able to feel comfortable in being in your own self, regardless of what the external world is. That's a huge leap for one,
Mhm.
and not something that happens automatically, right? Where did that need to feel accepted or the need to fit in, where did that begin?
Man, as soon as you said that, I'm immediately thinking about when I was 6 or 7 years old, growing up in the Texas Panhandle, where, like, football's a big thing. The only thing that would have been bigger than playing, football in the Texas Panhandle was being cast to play Jesus in the annual school Christmas play. And I remember there was this one particular game. It was a community all-star championship game. I was the quarterback, and I had scored the game-winning touchdown. And man, I honestly remember this like it was yesterday. I looked to the sideline. I'm scanning the sideline. I'm looking for my biggest fan, which you probably guess who that was. It was my mom. And when my eyes met my mom's eyes, I ran to her. She was leaning down. She had this beautiful bright smile on her face. I was gleaming. I was just a kid that just scored a game-winning touchdown. I was feeling so excited. And my mom, in this moment, she said something to me that I'll always remember. And she said, "Son, I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. You scored the game-winning touchdown." And I didn't have to intellectually understand what was happening in that moment. And I didn't intellectually understand because I felt everything that I needed to feel right here. And what had happened in that moment is I was taught to believe that my performance in life determines my measure of acceptance in this world. And from that moment forward, that experience, performance determines acceptance, it was reinforced time and time again. When I got an A on a test, I was celebrated and congratulated. When I got a D or an F, which unfortunately there were a lot of those, right, I was reprimanded and I was sent to my room and told to do better and be better. And so these experiences are just ingrained at such a young age that, yeah, biologically we're wired for acceptance, right? That's in our bones, that's in our genes. And so if we're wired for that, and then life comes along and teaches us, and for me personally speaking, like, I was taught the fastest way and the most reliable way to be accepted by my primary caretaker, which meant everything to me and also my peers, was just to score more touchdowns. And so from an early age, scoring touchdowns, like, my stats were no longer just numbers on a piece of paper. My stats were a definition of my worth. And scoring touchdowns, it wasn't something that you did or did not do. It was who I was or who I was not.
How do you move through that then, or move past that, or deal with it, or like what?
Yeah.
How did you go about, working through that?
Yeah, so I think this is like kind of my soul curriculum. It's like my soul came to this earth to learn this story, and to better understand how to live through this story with less resistance, I should say. My book comes out September. I think the publishing date is September 22nd next year. And in the book, in the couple of opening chapters, I talk about how we all have a survivor self, and then we all have a sacred self, right? And that surviving self, that survival self, it's who we were conditioned to be or who we were taught to be in order to survive our lives. And the thing about a survival self is it serves us really well. It works. It works. Like, for me personally speaking, like, the need to perform well so that I can be accepted and approved of created such a deep motivation in me, where ambition is what I ate for breakfast. As cliche and cheesy as that sounds, like, I was such an ambitious young man, and nothing was going to stop me. Tell me what mountain to climb, and then tell me how fast I need to climb it, and I'm going to do everything I can to reach down into the depths of me, pull out the willpower and ambition needed, and I'm going to meet, if not surpass, expectations. That's just the mentality that I had, because it was fueled by the survival self. It was fueled by this need to be accepted. And so, all of the accomplishments and all of the achievements, it was deeper than just the love of the game. It was the way that I learned how to survive in my life. Eventually, and there's a lot of literature coming out around this over the last several years, the idea that we all have a first half of life and we all have a second half of life, right? Henry Deere Swift, a Native American teacher, he says we all have a sacred self and we all have a survival self. And even though, everybody has a sacred self, not everybody lives into that sacred experience, because it's a choice to step into the second half of our lives. Second half of our life has nothing to do with chronological age, right? It's like, okay, I'm 40 years old. I'm stepping into the second half of my life. It has everything to do with our psyches. And for me, a lot of times, from my experience, what invites us to step into that second half of life, what invites us to step into that sacred self, what invites us to leave that survival self that once served us really well, but now has become too small for us, is kind of an experience that's known as a divine ambush. And the ambush is when, and this comes from Richard Rohr, actually, the divine ambush is this experience when the scaffolding of our life, that first half of life, we built a reputation, we built a name for ourselves, we built and created success. Our survival self really served us really well. And it allowed us to build this beautiful life. And the scaffolding is seemingly indestructible. We're good, we're safe, we're secure, which are main priorities inside of the first half of life. And for me, that's me all the way up to West Point, get drafted, second player out of the history of West Point to ever get selected in the NFL draft, the first player ever given the permission to go and play and serve simultaneously. I'm serving our country. I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. I'm an NFL athlete. I'm playing in the NFL now. Like, this is a childhood dream. Like, we built the life. And then what happens is life comes along and says, hey, I love you too much. I love you too much to allow you to continue to play small inside of that survival story, inside of that survival self, where your accomplishments determine your sense of acceptance and belonging in this world. I want to invite you into a deeper experience. And that divine ambush comes online, and there is this loss. It's like the scaffolding just collapses, and that can be ushered in by several different ways. It could be the loss of a career unexpectedly. It could be an affair, a spouse cheats on you, the loss of a loved one that you didn't see coming and wasn't planning for. You can get sick. And there's just something that comes into our lives, and the winds blow so heavily that it just wipes away everything that was once steady and familiar. And now you are standing on very shaky and uncertain ground. And that collapse, Cameron, is if you can learn how to work with that collapse and everything that that entails, who you are that emerges out on the other side is no longer the small self. It is no longer the person who needs to be accepted in order to survive. You've learned how to belong to yourself. You've learned how to reclaim the agency that you have forfeited. You're no longer allowing other people and what they say and what they do or what they think to determine who you are or who you are not. There is just something that happens inside of a soul, a transformation, that who you are on the other side of it cannot be moved or threatened by what that which once did move and threaten you in the first half of life. You are completely new.
Who was Caleb before? Who was Caleb when you were maybe getting to a point of being rock bottom? And then who is Caleb now?
I think like who Caleb was through all of these seasons of life was true. Like, was the same. There was a whole Caleb moving through all of these seasons of life, but the adaptations and the conditioning and the wounding created different versions of him that emerged through each season of life. And in the beginning, you know, Caleb was a deeply empathetic, kind, compassionate, devout, hungry for something bigger than himself from as long as I can remember. He was somebody that lived wildly open and courageously. He loved deep. That's who Caleb was. And he cared deeply. He cared deeply about others. You know, I can remember countless times that, you know, all through middle school and high school, I was never accepted. I had very few friends, even though I was, you know, the captain of the team and I was the star athlete. I was just never accepted. And the only time people knocked on my door was when they were in a crisis of their own and they were going through an intense breakup, or they were just betrayed by and rejected by some of their close friends, and they were feeling the weight of it all. They would come and sit on my doorstep and we would just talk, and I would hold space for them then. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember even as a child, I'd be like, why am I doing this for you? You're such an asshole to me. But here we are. And I think that's who Caleb was. And that version of Caleb that was so innocent and so true was also so deeply wounded that, you know, I alluded to this earlier. It just created a very hard heart. And I didn't care who you were. don't get in my way. I'm going to pursue success at all costs and at any cost, and I'm going to basically get what is going to ensure my survival and at the time satisfy what I believe to be my deepest longing. And that was that sense of wholeness. That was like a sense of it's finally enough, because I've lived my entire life with this deep sense that something is missing, that no matter how much I accomplish, no matter where I go, no matter what I do, it's still not enough. There's something missing in my life. And I was just on a quest to satisfy that innate desire, that longing in me. And that brought me to the NFL, where the scaffolding of my life finally collapsed. And after that, I moved to Canada. I become a janitor of an organization. I sleep on a basement floor of a boiler room for the next 5 years of my life. And I'm literally cleaning bathrooms, washing windows, and vacuuming floors in exchange for therapy, so that I could figure out just what happened to me. I did everything that I was supposed to do. I followed all of the rules. I succeeded. I accomplished the goals, and I was lied to. I was misled. I did everything that I was told to do that would allow me to live a life that was full of aliveness, that felt good to live, and it didn't. I was broken, I was miserable, I was scared, and I was small. And in that season of my life, there was a lot of confusion, obviously. I was learning how to operate by a new internal operating system. I was learning to play with a new playbook. But I think the characteristic that really defined me the most in that season of life is there was an unshakable hunger. There
Hunger for
was
what?
hunger for growth. I started to taste freedom. You go from playing in front of 80,000 people to vacuuming floors and cleaning bathrooms on your hands and knees and no applause. I distinctly remember being in a bathroom during the holidays, listening to some podcast by a gentleman named Jonathan Martin, who several years later actually married my wife and I. That's how much he meant to me.
Wow.
And just feeling so free. I felt joy, maybe arguably for one of the first times in my life, true, pure joy. And when you taste that freedom, that there's no more hiding, there's no more facades, there's no more pretenses, like you can just show up and be you, like you never want to go back. And when I tasted that, I was hungry for more. It was like something inside of me was unlocked, and there was this never infinite well that I could dive into, and I was going to dive at all costs and any cost, for as long as it took. And that was really the posture of my heart in that season of life. Is I don't care how long transformation takes, I'm going to pursue it with everything that I have. And that was such a sacred and beautiful and transformative season of my life, and which then led me to really kind of the next season. There's a lot of life lived in between, but who I am now. And it's funny, T.S. Eliot, he's got that beautiful line. He says, in the end, you will arrive back to the beginning and know that place for the first time. So in the end, you'll arrive back to the beginning and know that place for the first time. And I feel like, I've returned to so much of the childhood innocence that I lived with, that purity of heart, that deep longing to live congruent in alignment with oneself and to serve others, and to really live wholeheartedly devoted to my contribution to the world, and to love life deeply. And I feel like that's genuinely who I am today. That was a really long answer, but thank you for asking.
There's some really real quality insight in there as well, though. And I appreciate you sharing. How does ambition come into your life now then?
Yeah, it's a great question.
With how you're showing up and how you see the world.
Yeah, that is something that I have continuously wrestled with. And, a lot of times I find that people, when they spend enough time with me and they start to kind of see how I live my life and the things that I wrestle with, they ask the question, like, does success not matter to you anymore? And I say, no, success is wildly important to me. And I'm arguably more ambitious than I've ever been before. I think what's changed, Cameron, is the driving force behind my ambition. That's what matters the most. And, I had a wise teacher that once said, what you start with is what you finish with. Meaning, like, if you start your pursuit of success from a deficit, like if you're starting to prove that you are enough, or that you are starting to avoid the fear of not being enough, or the fear of not measuring up to your father's expectations, or whatever it might be, it doesn't matter what you do, how far you go, or what you accomplish. Like, in the end, it's still not enough, because what you start with is what you finish with. And so for me, the inner work, like, crossing over that threshold and living in the collapse, and allowing the collapse to become the great teacher that transforms us from the inside out. What's really transforming is the driving forces behind our ambition. When I step on a stage to speak now, I can genuinely say that in the beginning, when I started speaking, how many years ago, when I was still in the heartbeat of, or the underbelly of this journey, it was all about, like, am I important? Are people receiving me well? What are they thinking about me? Is this really going to elevate my career? Now it's those are all stories that don't even cross my conscious mind. And for me now, the driving force is, like, people are hurting. People are longing to taste something real. People are wanting deeper connection to themselves, to the people in their lives, and to the greater whole all around them. How do we facilitate that? How do we create the conditions that help people actually experience something true, so that they can wake up in their lives and not just live it, but wildly enjoy it through the process? There's a deep, deep hunger behind my ambition to see people healed, and to see people step into their fullest potential, not through just external success, but deeper internal growth. And so ambition still plays a big role, but the source behind the ambition is what matters the most.
It sounds that the ambition has moved from internal to external almost. And what I mean by that is that the external is there is a desire to serve versus I'm going to use the external to know that I'm enough.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good saying.
Do you feel that you're enough now?
I do. Yeah. Actually,
Yeah.
it says June 3rd, 2019. It's finally enough.
What happened? All right. What happened that day?
I was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway in, LA a week before. I had just had probably one of the most debilitating panic attacks of my life. It felt like a dark night of the senses and a dark night of the spirit. It was a dark night all around. And I moved to LA, to give you a little bit more context. I followed my heart to Los Angeles. This was after Canada, after serving. Like, Los Angeles found me. And like, you move out to Los Angeles, anything is possible. Like, there's a palpable energy out there that, wow, anything is possible. And I'm a small Texas boy at heart. Like, Los Angeles is for a bunch of creatives and doers and artists and, people that are not me. And that's the story that I told myself. And I can honestly say the last place that I ever thought about moving was Los Angeles, ever in my life. And it found me. There's an opportunity that opened up there. I went out and visited LA, and I was walking the beach one morning, and I was like, holy shit, I'm moving to Los Angeles. Like, my soul is calling me to go to LA. And unconsciously, there were so many expectations. Like, you moved to LA, like, your soul is calling you out to LA. Like, for me, I was like, oh, it's all coming together now. I had great success. I lost it all. I went through this whole rebirth journey. I found my version of Mr. Miyagi, and I'm being mentored, and I'm emerging out on the other side. And now it's time to go build a really big brand in Los Angeles. And it's all going to open up for me. Like, wow, here we go. And yeah, that's not what happened. I moved out to Los Angeles, and all of the expectations around what I thought my life was going to look like and what I hoped my life would look like were continuously unmet. And there was so much deep grief and sorrow that I was navigating. And at that time in my life, I was not an apprentice to sorrow. I didn't have a healthy relationship with grief. Rilke, who is one of my all-time favorite poets, he says, "I don't have much knowledge in darkness yet, so this massive grief makes me small." And what I love about that is it says, like, when I do have much knowledge in darkness, the massive grief, it can enlarge us, right? That's what we can draw from that. And at the season of my life, all of the grief, I didn't have knowledge in it yet. I didn't know how to, be intimate with my grief. And so it made me small. And I was after that panic attack and feeling the weight of my life, I was driving down the highway. I had the windows down. I saw this, like, you know how you're on the highway, there's like, you just kind of glance to your left and you'll see like a ladder going over a cliff that will take you down to kind of a shore, a rocky shore. So I pulled over and I busted a U. I pulled over, went down the ladder, and I just sat there kind of in a contemplative, meditative posture, just watching the waves crash against the rock. And I wish it was like the heavens opening up, but it wasn't that story. There was something about watching the waves just never ending crashing against the rock, and the rock so steady and so sturdy, like almost seemingly like indestructible, was changing shape. It was like the water was constantly washing over and the rock was changing shape. And I just gave me a physical image to what I felt like was accurately being depicted in my life. And there was this deep knowing in me that it was time to give myself over to the nothingness of that season of my life. I was fighting so hard for my life to look a certain way, and I couldn't get there no matter how hard I tried. No amount of effort was changing that. And in this posture of openness and in this experience, there was like something in me saying, then allow it to be nothing and let that be okay. Allow it to be nothing and let that be okay. And there was something in me with tears streaming down my face that I just said yes to it. I said yes. It was like the first time in my life I radically accepted my life for what it was. And in that moment, Cameron, there was such a release, not just tears, but it was like my soul took an exhale. And the only way, and it's a little crass, so I apologize. The only way that I could verbalize what my soul felt like in that moment is almost like I just had an orgasm. Like there was this orgasmic release, which I didn't. My soul might have, but there was this orgasmic relief like, oh my God, it's always been enough. I just have been resisting allowing myself to surrender into it. Penny Pierce has this beautiful line that says, when like the great fear is a falling into the nothingness or falling into the void, right? But when we fall into the void, we realize that it holds everything. The nothing, it's everything. Richard Rohr says, the ground that we're trying to attain is the ground that we've been standing on all along. Barbara Brown Taylor, who's one of my favorite writers and speakers, she says the reason why so many people can't find the X that marks the spot is because we're freaking standing on it.
Mhm.
And I think that's like the ultimate journey, is to realize that, like, through all of the pursuits of success, all of the effort, all of the willpower, all of the upward trajectory of trying to do more, be more, achieve more, to get where we think we need to be or what we want our lives to look like. And we always fall short from that. My journey was always falling short, led me down this downward descent, descent, and got me to this place of radically accepting that if my life never changes from this moment forward, fuck, we're good. I'm okay. And there was something about that that allowed me to almost see for the first time that the ground that I had been chasing since I was just a young boy, so that one day I could feel enough, has been the ground that I've been standing on this entire time. And my soul finally was still enough to see it. And when I saw it, everything changed.
Mm. How has that led to further clarity from leaning into the not knowing? Has it led to further clarity? Has it led to further clarity as to who you are, where you're going, why you're going there?
Yeah. See, I think clarity is an ego's game.
Mm.
I
Tell me
don't
more.
think soul operates through clarity. I think I have been somebody that has been devout to following soul at any and every cost, which has gotten strangely difficult now that I have a family. Like, it was easy when it was just solo Caleb, running through Los Angeles. Whatever Soul's asking me, I'm going to follow Soul. And I have always been somebody that has chased clarity. And because clarity makes me feel safe, clarity makes me feel secure, and clarity helps me feel less vulnerable in life. Like, I have clarity. And I think there are seasons where there's intense clarity of what we're building, but I don't chase clarity. There is more of a willingness and openness to surrender. Now, I don't even want to use the word surrender because it gets thrown around so easily these days and it sounds almost cliche, but a willingness to make yourself at home in the unknowing. What I mean by that is it has led me to moments of inside of the unknowing where there has been creative inspiration that comes forth from a deeper place that's not intellectualized, that's not like willpower, not effort. There's just like something in me that moves me in a certain direction, and I just follow that without having the clarity of where it's going to lead. Does that make
So
sense?
is there a conviction then that comes from
I
stepping
cannot not
forward
do
into
this.
the unknown? Because it sounds there's almost a conviction there where previously that wasn't even close to existence. Well, it was there all along, but your ability to recognize it and see it and move into that, is there a conviction that you have?
Yeah, I literally was just journaling about that the other day. I think the most tension, and I haven't actually spoken about this in a while or ever, I don't know. I think the most tension that I've ever experienced in my life is when I lose that conviction and my life becomes all about building a bigger and better speaking business, making more money, providing a beautiful life for my family, and being safe and secure, which I think are all beautiful things. I think yes to all of it. Like, I live with the notion of like what I want wants me. Right. And so there is a desire to grow my speaking business. There is a desire to get on bigger stages. There is a desire to make more money. There is a desire to, create a more beautiful experience for my family. There is a desire for that. But when I make it about that, immediately my life goes from here to here and that tension builds. But when I have this deeper conviction of following soul, so to give you an idea, like right now in the season of my life, like I am absolutely quiet on social media. There is such a fear in me that there's this feeling in me, Cameron, right now that I'm becoming obsolete in the speaking industry. Like, I'm not visible. I'm not talking about the work that I'm doing. I'm not self-promoting. I'm not, building a brand. I'm not doing any of those things. And I feel like I am literally becoming obsolete. I am disappearing from an industry that I have fought hard to work in and to make a name for myself and to continue to grow. And I feel like I'm just getting started 5 years in. And now, but soul is asking me to get quiet. Soul is asking me to ripen. Soul is asking me to spend more time in nature, to sit by the fire. I told my wife yesterday, the most productive thing that I can do right now is to sit by a fire. It's the most productive thing that I can do. And there is such a deep conviction in me that I cannot not follow that. To not follow that is the very definition of self-betrayal. And I am delusional to think that I can create the life that I truly want through self-betrayal.
I think there's some real beauty in having that time. Now, whether it's near the fire, that's a perfect place to be, right? To contemplate and to further understand and deepen the understanding as to where to from here. And I think a lot of people struggle to make the time to reflect, to make the time to have space.
Yeah.
That's often where our best ideas come from. I was just giving a talk on Thursday, like a few days ago, and I said, where do your best ideas come from? And, there's the shower and this, and then dude over to the left is like the toilet. And, it's just these different places where we're away from, it's almost like we're away from needing to know.
That's what I'm saying. It's that you're allowing yourself to live in a constant tension of not knowing, but the tension is not making you small because you've learned how to work with it. The tension has become your greatest asset, because in order for our external life to expand, our internal ecosystem has to expand. Otherwise, what ends up happening is the weight of the success that we work so hard to build eventually can fracture the foundation within ourselves. And we see this with burnout. We see this in a lot of different experiences where the weight of the world that we work so hard to build is now crushing the soul. And so there has to be this inside out approach that allows us to enlarge this territory so that it becomes this bedrock foundation that can actually hold this next season of expansion in our lives. And this is, I think, the invitation that we're all being invited into. And I think go back to your point real fast, like I had a quick thought. I think one of the biggest things that has changed in my life as we kind of reflected upon ambition is I'm in this season of life where I told, I was talking to my wife the other day. If you haven't noticed yet, she's like my muse. The best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm not going to build this next season of expansion on the back of willpower and effort, because what's built with willpower and effort has to be sustained by willpower and effort. I'm not playing that game anymore. And I think that there is a way that we can enter the river of life, right? And I think so many people know how to push the river forward, myself included. We can push the motherfucking river forward. And I think we fail to realize the river's flowing effortlessly. Our work is to learn how to rest in the river. What does it look like to rest in a river in a world full of demands and expectations coming from you in every area and angle of your life? That's the bigger question that we're being invited to explore. Because if we can rest in the river, that water is going to find a way and it runs effortlessly. And so for me, what does it look like to build a life in participation with the natural rhythms of life? That requires a giving over to something bigger than you. That requires a letting go. That requires a surrender. And this is the dance that we're constantly entertaining. And how I kind of position this and put language to this is everybody's very familiar with the upward trajectory, the do more, be more, achieve more, work harder, work longer mindset. I call that the external edge, right? But at some point, moving our lives forward for every single one of us, and I think this is the threshold that a lot of us are being invited to step over from the first half of the life to the second half of life. There comes a point when moving our life forward doesn't look like doing more and trying harder. It looks like resisting less. It looks like trying softer. It looks like slowing down. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I think a lot of reasons why we have a hard time carving out time and making space to sit by a fire, even though that might be the most productive thing that we can do, or actually have stillness in our lives, is because we've only known how to build a life through effort and willpower. And there's a whole other side of the coin. This is the heartbeat of so much of my coaching work. And the reason why my contribution is to help people navigate this other way of doing life, where the river's already flowing. We're going to work on you getting in the river and actually learn how to rest so that the natural current takes you to where you want to go. And it's almost effortlessly. It doesn't come without hard work or action, but you're not making your life happen. You're participating with life. And that is a wildly different approach and subsequently a wildly different experience in life. The Buddhists would call it divine laziness. And there's something to that. I don't know about you, but I want to enter into my divine laziness season of life as I get older.
Maybe there's a structure, or maybe not. But I'm thinking someone listening to this who's wanting to invite maybe some more stillness, maybe some more time to be able to think and contemplate and become. And yet on the other side are all these demands, are the things that have to get done. And if they just move away from that,
yeah,
head out to a mountain, go buy a campfire, and just there for the next 6 months. Their house is repossessed, totally. the car's gone, the family's left them. Like, there's so many pressures here. How then do we go about? Are there certain steps that you recommend to be able to build this in a way that is sustainable for today's day and age?
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a great point. I did just walk away from the NFL and move to Canada, and I thrusted myself into it. And there's no way in hell I'd be able to do something like that now because of the responsibilities. And so I honor this in everyone. I don't think you have to blow up your life. You don't have to divorce your spouse. You don't have to leave your children. I think the highest act of spirituality is to be exactly where you are, and to learn how to do it differently. And so, if that is not an option, for sure, I am somebody that subscribes to the notion of what is the teacher we need. And so, like, when you look at the process of alchemy, and I'll touch it very, very lightly, but you have the prima materia, right? The alchemy of turning lead into gold. So you have the prima materia, you have the raw materials that the alchemist is going to work with for the transformation and transfiguration to happen. And that's ultimately what we're after, right? We're turning lead into gold. There's a transformation and then a transfiguration so that we can become somebody new on the other side of it. You have the prima materia, the raw elements that are being put into the vessel. And so for us, there's the raw elements of our lives that we are gathering. And I, again, subscribe to what is the teacher that we need. So what are the raw elements that you're currently working with in your life that you might be ignoring? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling a deeper loneliness in your life? Do you walk around posturing and pretending to be somebody that you're not? Are you betraying yourself inside of relationships or inside of your work? Are you ignoring your soul? And all of these seemingly uncomfortable, and I kind of alluded to this at the beginning, uncomfortable and almost like obstacles in our lives right now, they are the starting place. They are the starting place. And so, apart from that, Cameron, there has to be, you used the word earlier, which I love, is conviction of I have to tell the truth. I have to tell the truth. My life, is not going to change unless I'm willing to make a change. Where in my life am I not telling the truth? Where in my life am I not being radically honest? Where in my life am I betraying myself? Where in my life? And start there, whether that is inviting in a trusted resource to tell the truth, whether that looks like, having a hard conversation with your spouse or your partner that you have been avoiding for a really fucking long time, whether it looks like setting boundaries and saying no because you've been a people pleaser. Like, most of the time, people know exactly what we need to do, but we just fail to do it, again for the reasons that we talked about earlier on. Our nervous systems just aren't accustomed to saying yes to that kind of discomfort, uncertainty, and vulnerability. And so I am somebody that I largely subscribe to questions. Rilke, he has that famous line, don't look for answers, right? Because you're not ready to live in the answers. Ask better questions. And then someday, as you ask these questions, you become the answer that you're looking for. And so there's a few questions that I would invite people to sit with. First, like, is there something that you need to be doing that you're not, that you're avoiding? And that can be as much as like actually leaving the job because that's been brewing for a really long time. That could be like having a really tough conversation with your partner. Is there something that you need to be doing? And it kind of evolves into the next question of like, where are you not telling the truth? Where are you not telling the truth in your life? Where are you still pretending to be somebody that you're not? Where are you trying so hard to fit in and to belong? Like, can we tell the truth? And then lastly, what's your relationship with the discomfort? And how can we posture our hearts? How can we posture our hearts to be in a partnership with the discomfort, to use the discomfort as a mirror to reflect back to us the inner work that needs to happen so that we can evolve out of this place? And then lastly, and I'm not just saying this, because we're in this space, but, while nobody can do the journey for you, you are not meant to do it alone. And so there is something so potent and powerful about getting into a trusted container where you can allow yourself to be fully seen. Like, you can allow yourself to drop the armor, to drop the pretenses, to drop the facade, to embody a little vulnerability, to step into a greater measure of authenticity and allow somebody to witness the beauty that you are and work in that container through this process of alchemy, so that next season or the next step in alchemy, right, is Negredo. And it is all that raw material is now blackened, blackest of the black. And it starts to be decomposed. It starts to crumble. It starts to soften, right? And then that's when the collapse is happening. And that's when it feels like everything is coming undone. And it's so important to stay inside of that trusted container because that resource is there to hold you. right? Is to have the emotional support, the emotional capacity to hold you so that you can continue to follow that descent as deep as it needs to go. So all of that prima material can get red hot. This is why I love working with fires. That coal, you build that coal base that's just red hot so that a new, deeper, eternal flame can begin to emerge inside of your life. And that flame, that's eros, right? That's the passion of life. That's the, this is why I'm here. And that's when we can start finding like a soul calling. That's when we can start finding greater alignment between who we are and what we do. Like, I don't, you probably feel like this too. Like, there's no real separation between who I am and what I do. Right? It's all pretty much one thing for me. It's all, and that's why, like, I find that in order for my business to expand, I have to expand first because those two things are directly connected. But there is such deep meaning and satisfaction and fulfillment that I live with on a daily basis that I'll never take for granted. And so, those questions are a really great place to start. And I think what is the teacher. So if you're dealing with grief, if you're dealing with sadness, if you're dealing with loneliness, if you're dealing with sorrow, whatever you are dealing with, those are the doorways that you first have to walk through.
It's a great starting point, our questions, right? And as we continue to evolve through the process, to continue asking ever evolving questions.
Absolutely.
The questions, I mean, I remember hearing years ago, the quality of your life will be in direct correlation with the quality of the questions that you ask.
So true.
Right. And so with those questions, you mentioned about the best thing you can be doing is being by the fire. With that as an example, now whether it's somebody next to an actual fire or somewhere else, for someone again who's going through it right now, and they can be utilizing, as you mentioned, utilizing a resource. What about out of that time then, right? Is there a certain, if we were to use some kind of actionable pieces here where it is, okay, there's specific questions they are able to ask now, which is fantastic. Resource that we can embark on a journey together with. That's another action. What about outside of that? Is there a certain amount of time that someone should be spending away from technology, away from the noise, if you will? And, is there something that we could build in there or have somebody walk away and go, yeah, I'm going to try that out. I'm going to test that out. Even if it was just a starting point there while they've got, again, just the craziness of life going on still, thinking that most people aren't necessarily going to be able to just leave everything.
Yeah, great question. This is going to sound silly, but I actually bring this up in my keynote just to give you some more context real fast. Like, what can we be doing? Yeah, sitting by the fire is great. Yeah. Working in a trust container is great, but then 8 a.m. comes around and I got to show up for work, right? And then I get lost in work and I am met with disruption after disruption and disgruntled coworkers and, failed plans. And next thing you know, it's 5 p.m. Got to go pick up my kids from daycare. Well, they're sick again. Great. So they're like screaming and yelling at us. Now we got to go home and there's a shit ton of laundry to do. And then you wake and then you get into bed and you're just fucking exhausted and you're like, inner work? Are you kidding me? Inner work, right? And so again, I think there's so many different ways I can go, or we can talk about this conversation. But I for anybody that's sitting right there, this is just coming up right now. For anybody that can identify with that experience in your own unique way, self-compassion. Like self-compassion. My life never changed from self-criticism, but my life definitely changed through self-compassion. Like, be gentle with yourself. The universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, sees the desire in you to transform. It sees it in you to grow. And I think we need to go take time off for that growth to happen. And that's true. Yes, that's true. There's an element of needing some space to breathe. That's important. But sometimes life just doesn't afford us that opportunity. And I think that we can engage with the chaos of life so that life itself becomes the sparring partner that allows us to grow, so that you can have that same experience that I just alluded to a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, and you don't feel so defeated. You've got the capacity and you haven't forfeited your joy and you still can feel so much gratitude that life is so full and chaotic, but dear God, I get to live this. Wow, I get to live this. What a privilege and what a joy. That requires somebody to have some capacity in their life. And so for me, Something that I did early on in my journey, because going back to the fire, Cameron, I've had a fire going for 3 weeks straight in my backyard. It starts at 5:30 in the morning. I put my last amount of wood at 10 p.m. at night. I wake up at 4:30, and then I start stoking the coals. I keep the coals hot all the time, and the next thing you know, by between 5:30, the flame starts, and it goes throughout the entire day. And what I love about that, because I'm in a season where I alluded to, like, I'm not online, I'm not visible right now because Soul is asking me not to do that. Soul's asking me for something differently, and there's something about tending to the fire that's actively tending to me. Right? The fire is in my constant awareness, and as I'm stoking that fire, there's something in me being stoked simultaneously because I'm tending to it. So the question becomes then, how do we tend and stoke the fire within oneself in the chaos of life? How do we in the midst of all of the demands and the distractions just continue to stoke the fire? And you said it. For me, I'm not really on social media right now. I don't need to be. I found myself in a really bad, vicious and toxic cycle of scrolling X, Twitter, just so that I can keep up with the politics. And I'm like, what am I doing? The world is always ending. Always. Okay, the world is always ending, and that sends me constant, like, that immediately sends me into this, like, mode. Like, this is not a place to receive. Right? We can't receive anything when we're like this. But for so many of us, this is what's familiar. So we want to recreate this scenario because this is what feels familiar. Therefore, it's safe. Even though we hate it, it's safe. Doing this is uncomfortable. Allowing yourself to feel peace is not familiar. So it's unsafe. So it's like we have to teach our nervous system differently to be more accustomed to peace than it is to fear, failure, or stress. And so the question becomes, I'm all over the place, but, like, how do we stoke the fire throughout the day? For me, I remember early on in this journey, if what is the teacher, then I need to be aware of what is. So I need to cultivate more self-awareness in my life to deploy that self-awareness throughout the chaos of my life. So in the moment, I can be aware of whatever it is, the stress, the fear, the overwhelm, the insecurity, the depression, the sorrow, and I can learn how to work with it in just that moment. And so two things. The first thing that I did is I started a simple little notebook. It's a notebook that I kept in my back pocket, and I know it sounds so silly. I call this the feelings playbook from stage. I still want to start creating feelings playbooks so I can start passing them out to attendees, because it's like the number one part of my keynote that people feel like truly inspired by. But the point of the feeling notebook is because I had so much time and so much practice avoiding the discomfort of my life in the name of getting the job done, in the name of pursuing more success, I was constantly avoiding, right? And there's a big difference, Cameron, between moving your life from a place of avoiding fear, right? Or moving your life in the place of, like, going to the future. Like, they're two distinctively different, even though they look the same from the outside in. And so I pulled out this notebook. I had a PhD in avoiding discomfort. And so I created this notebook. And I mean, anytime I was feeling some sort of discomfort in my life, some fear, some insecurity, some pressure, some stress, I stopped what I was doing. I'd walk away from a conversation. I'd pull out this notebook and I would just write down to the best of my ability what I was feeling, like what just came up. And I would just write it down and write it down and write it down. And I would go, I'm telling you, Cameron, notebook after notebook after notebook. And the only thing that that did is that just, like, it allowed me to have more awareness of my feelings. Like, it allowed me to, like, almost in that moment, oh, I went from there's such a deep insecurity happening in me right now, and I feel so small that I'm going to project it on another person and make them feel small so I can feel better about myself. And that used to happen like this because it was unconscious, to having the awareness that, wow, I'm feeling really insecure right now. Hmm. And it put a little breathing room. You know that quote by Viktor Frankl, in between stimulus and response, there is space.
Mm.
And in that space is our power to choose. And what we choose determines the quality of our lives. Like, it was almost like in between stimulus, insecurity, and response, by writing it down, it created a little bit of extra space for me to say, huh, I'm feeling insecure right now. Cool. Now I got a decision to make. Do I want to let that insecurity run me, or can I run that insecurity? Cool. So I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I'm telling you, I still have notebooks in my life that I use today. But here's the main point of why we would do this is in between stimulus and response. So feeling insecurity. Um, I'm, this is a big part of my work inside of my keynote, and I practice this religiously today, is I recognize the signal. So, okay, cool. I just recognized the insecurity. Immediately, I reframe it in the moment and I said, wow, what a beautiful opportunity to grow. this is my inner growth. This is not going and sitting by a tree on the top of a mountain at a wellness spa. Like, this is inner growth happening in real time in my life. My life is the sanctuary for me to be reborn. So I reframed it. Whoa, this is so uncomfortable, but there's a lot of insecurity that I'm feeling right now. What a beautiful opportunity to grow. And then I respond to the insecurity. What's one thing that I can do to show that insecurity that I'm the one that's in charge, to show that insecurity that I'm going to work with you and not be afraid of you, that I'm going to grow because of you and not shrink because of you. And so a big thing that we can do is in the moment is teaching our nervous system, because when we're feeling insecurity, right, that's a loyal soldier coming online to protect us, to shrink us, or to make us really big so that we can suffocate the room and make other people feel small, or to shrink us and disappear so we don't draw any more attention. And so what's one thing that I can do to show my nervous system in that moment of feeling deeply insecure that we're safe, we're okay. Like, if our nervous system is on high alert right now, what do we do to make it feel safe? And there are, oh my God, there are hundreds, if not thousands of ways that we can regulate a nervous system. Just for anybody listening that might identify with this, the book Anchored by Deb Dana is one of the books that I read yearly that will give you a whole playbook on how to tend to your nervous system. But everybody, like, it's pretty simple. Like, if you're feeling safe, like, the best thing that you can do is, or you're feeling insecure, teach your nervous system to be safe by looking around and identifying 5 distinct colors. Like, get off the insecurity, look around, show me 5 different colors. Okay, the wall is white, that clock is brown, that sign is kind of a purple pinkish tone, doorknob is gold. Immediately, right, we're grounding ourselves. We're coming to the present. We're not lost in insecurity land. We're coming to the present. We're doing something to our nervous system in that moment. So our nervous system is now expanding and growing because of the insecurity and not the other way around. And I think the feelings notebook, so the awareness around what we're feeling, and then recognizing that, reframing that as an opportunity to forgo, and then recentering in that moment can allow life and the complexity of life to actually become our greatest asset.
The response comes from having the first couple of pieces in place,
Yep.
right? Because,
Absolutely.
and this is where this comes maybe full circle. We were talking a little earlier. We often know what we need to do,
Yeah.
and that's the response,
Yes.
right? We know the thing it is that we need to be doing, but what's so often missing is the awareness to begin with, that the response happens before we even become aware of what was actually going on.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so that awareness piece is so incredibly important. And what you share there around the reframing component as well, because it's how we process it. Like that's what gives life meaning, right? It's what our perception of it is that determines as to our experience of life. So yeah, I wonder then, how does someone go about building that awareness when they're in a moment? It's super stressful. They're automatically going to it. I know I've had this with clients where I'll suggest making sure you have a number of different things. And maybe that book that you mentioned could be one example of that, of having at least 7 things that you can be doing as soon as that feeling occurs, as soon as that emotion occurs, because the emotions are a guide at the end of the day. They're like guideposts, right? Of, oh, I'm feeling this. Am I wanting to be feeling that going forward or not? If I am, continue on, rock on, continue forth. And if not, then it becomes, okay, how can I choose a different story there? So in that moment, how does someone generate the awareness? If that is what at the end of the day is missing, or a large part of what is missing, what are some things that people could do that would build that form of space when they are in it, right? Not afterwards, because it's so easy when you look back, yeah, that was it. It's like, that's why people say, oh, hindsight is 20/20. It's like, it was always there though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think too, I'm not skirting the question. I do think that for me, like, writing down what I'm feeling in the moment is teaching me to be in the moment with the feelings. And what we have done, awareness, like presence, is a muscle. And for so many of us, it's severely underworked. Like,
we weren't taught how to build this, right? At school, it's not I'm a massive believer it should be a compulsory subject in schools, like life skills, right?
Yeah.
This and many of the other pieces that we've spoken about, because as we're yeah, coming up against all the different challenges of life. So how do we build the muscle then?
Yeah. I have like a simple little exercise in my life where, the morning when I wake up, 4:30 in the morning, whenever I wake up, as soon as my feet hit the ground, there is an intentional thought. I am I am operating in gratitude. Wow, feet are on the ground. Let's go get that coffee. Oh my gosh, let's drink a big glass of water. Ooh, we're gonna have fun today. No idea what's in store for us, but we're gonna have fun today, regardless of what comes. I've practiced long enough that there's something about as soon as my feet hit the ground, I'm in awareness, I'm in presence. I'm here now. That's taken time, but sometimes I will put my feet on the ground, I'll go get coffee, and I'll sit down and I'm like, oh shit, forgot. Like my mind was elsewhere. And there's something about like when, I've been out of the gym for 3 months and this is my start of my second week back, and I found myself loading up the bar for my back squats, and I'm like, bro, what are you doing? Like, bullshit. Take off 150 pounds. Like, bro, you got to build a foundation all over again because we lost it. Like, and that's okay. That's okay. And so there is the idea of like starting small, whether it is, for me, every morning I started at 30 seconds. I do about 15 to 20 minutes of meditation. And when I say meditation, I don't like to say the word meditation because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, meditation. Everybody knows we need to meditate. And I suck at it. I suck at it. So I'm not going to do it. Like, listen, when you sit down, you drop your shoulders, you relax your hands, and you just bring your awareness to your feet, the sole of your feet on the ground beneath you. Start there. You remember to yourself in this moment that, like, wow, something outside of my willpower and my ability is actually supporting the weight of my being. Cool. Bring it up. You feel your legs pressed up against the chair. You feel your butt and the lower back resting against the chair. Cool. Now you can access your breathing. You feel your breath, right? Now we're connecting to our breath. We're here. We feel the rise and the fall of our stomachs, the inhale and the exhales, the ups and the downs. I'm focused there. All my awareness is there. Cameron, within 15 seconds, you know where my awareness goes? What's for breakfast? Oh shit, my daughter has a doctor's appointment today. All right, cool. I'm out. I'm out of awareness. I'm out of presence. I'm gone. And then I used to, for the longest time, think I really suck at meditating. I can't go 20 mother effing seconds before I fell at this, right? And then Tara Brock is a lifesaver, and I learned a lot of my meditation around from her practices. And you know, she goes on to say like no, when your mind drifts and you go into all of the to-dos and you're lost in la la land and you're out there and you're aware that you're out there, wow, congratulations, you just did a rep of awareness, you did a rep of presence. Now bring it back to your breath. Up, down, inhale, exhale, up, down. Oh man, I forgot. I gotta buy a ticket for that keynote next week. Okay, I gotta do shit. I just wandered again. Let me bring it back to my breath. Like I used to practice that 30 seconds because that's about amount of time I could do before I would be frustrated. And then 3 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then 7 minutes, and then 10 minutes. And now like 15 to 20 minutes, like I'm just sitting in the morning allowing my mind to drift, becoming aware of my mind drifting and bringing it back to my breath. Allowing my mind to drift, bringing it back to my breath. Like it is such a simple tool that allows you to build the muscle of presence so that as you're operating throughout your day, the thing happens and you have a reaction, a response of curiosity instead of this, unconscious programming that keeps you stuck in this familiar pattern. When you can have that in spaciousness, that inner spaciousness, because you built the muscle of presence, the emotion happens, the experience happens, you feel the fear, you feel the insecurity, and you say, huh, I'm curious about that. What an interesting response. And you can choose differently. The thing that I will say about this, like me and my wife, I'm not just saying this to sound good. We hardly ever fight. We have hard conversations, but we don't fight. And there were some really good college football games on Saturday. And it was also probably one of the most beautiful days of the year. And we were staining our deck. And so I spent a lot of the time staining the deck. And I came in and I just put on college football because, I'm still a meathead at heart and I love to watch some good college football. And my wife, like, my partner, Kara, she said something to me like, I find it, challenging when you just assume that we're just going to sit in the house and watch football all day. And there was a moment in me that felt so attacked, right? That I felt attack that I wasn't aware of feeling attack. And I just gave it right back to her. I just in a microsecond, I gave it right back to her. You attack me, I'm gonna attack you. And she just looked at me because she's much more wise and she goes, huh. And that's all she said. And I was like, fuck. And I say that because we never get this perfect. We never get it perfect. And this brings me back to self compassion. I can sit there and beat myself up. You're a shit husband. Do better. Look at you. You call yourself a teacher. You're a guide. You're a coach, and you can't even do it right yourself. Like, I can beat myself up, or I can be like, wow, what a beautiful learning experience, Caleb. Like, you're doing a great job. Like, let's just get back to work. Let's have this conversation later, and let's also get back in the practice of meditation. We've come a long way, though, haven't we? And that changes my state. Like, we're that used to, probably, Cameron, in the back of the, like, I would be pissed for the next 7 hours, right? I'd probably storm out of the house. I'd go grab a beer at the bar and I'd feel sorry for myself. And then I'd come back and then we'd be in a bigger fight and then blah, 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 blah. Right. But when you have the psyche of an adult, when you've done the inner work and you're an actual adult inside of an adult body, it doesn't have to be that way.
What has she taught you?
We'd have to do a whole new podcast for that, bro.
What have been the big lessons? Because it sounds like there's been a huge amount of growth that's occurred. You mentioned about not fighting. You have difficult conversations though. So let's maybe start there.
Yeah.
How has that impacted your growth?
When I met my wife, now my wife, when I met Kara initially, I've done a lot of work. I was coming out of Canada. I moved to LA. We were both living in LA at the time, but we met through a writers retreat in Kentucky. Like, there was 12 people from around the country that were invited to this small town of Kentucky to basically have a retreat on learning how to publish your first book. And we were both one of the 12, and she sat next to me, and we sparked up a conversation, and then we had a conversation later into the night, and I went back to my little room, my cottage that night after the first night of meeting her, knowing that I just met my person. Like, wow. I just met my person. Thankfully, she thought the same thing too. And we were engaged, 3 months later, 4 months later, and married like six months later. And I think you can probably identify with that a little bit. But yeah,
132 days from knowing each other existed to marriage. So we're in the same camp, man.
Yeah. My wife, man, there's so many different directions I can go. I did a lot of work when I first met her, but there was something like I alluded to this earlier, like, can you move through your life allowing yourself to be fully seen? Because to the depth in which you're allowing yourself to be seen is directly correlated to the freedom that you can experience in your life. I genuinely believe that. And there's something about, like, I always think of that closing scene on 8 Mile with Eminem, that rap battle. He wins the rap battle by like, well, I did do this, and my best friend did do this, and this happened to me, and my mom is this, and my dad left me. Like, he tells the truth. He tells the truth, and there's nothing else left. And his opponent just is speechless. Like, you got me, bro. Like, I can't beat you because you told the truth. And I think there's something about that, like, in life, to tell the truth. And I had been telling the truth inside of my trusted space, but there was a deeper level of vulnerability to tell the truth inside of a trusted person that was like a romantic partner, like allowing the person that I felt like my soul came on this earth to be in partnership with. Like, that was another level of vulnerability that I had not yet tapped into. And I remember early on in our relationship, I alluded to it earlier. When I left high school and went to college, there was a lot of pain that I was dealing with, and I kind of said, I'll do whatever it takes to fit in. And all through college and leading into my time in the NFL, I was just coping with pain in really unhealthy ways. And one of the main ways that I coped with pain was through just random sex. Just sexual partner after sexual partner after sexual partner. And there was just, for so many reasons why that would be. And my wife's story is wildly different, like little to no partners. And we were early on in our partnership, and we were like, this is my person, and obviously the conversation around sex came up. and she started to, ask questions about my sexual past, and not like in a judgmental way, just inquiry and curious on what your relationship with is about sex. And I just shut down. Like all of the armor came up. I, was biting my cheek because in my head, I was thinking to myself, wow, I really fucked this up. Like I was so angry at myself because the story was if she finds out the truth, there's no way she will love me. Right. And that really mirrors back to like this sense of self that I had, a lot of the shame that I was still living with around that part of my life, but that part of my life never needed to be exposed because I was never in a committed partnership with anybody. And so there was just so much shame that I felt. And I remember like putting distance. We were literally spooning on a bed, face to face. We could feel each other's breath on our faces. And I just started to put space in between us, and I started to get tense, and I just shut down. And there was a clear emotional shift or emotional, there was a clear shift in my emotional state. And I remember her kind of like pulling her head back and like looking at me with such tender curiosity. And I was sitting there looking at her like a little boy that was just so scared of getting in trouble and so scared of messing this up. And she just simply asked me a question. She said, "Are you feeling shame right now?" And I immediately just started to cry. And then as I was laying there, her holding me, tears coming down my face, it could make me cry right now. Um, she started like blowing on my face, like, and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "There's no place for shame here. There's no place for shame." And I just remember like I always thought that the freedom that I was going to find in my life was going to come on the back of greater success, more achievements, more accolades. And here it is. Here it is. Everything that I've ever imagined my life to be, the fullness of the freedom that I've always desired to live into. Here it is as I'm laying on a bed with this woman across from me, fully in the depths of my shame and being witnessed in the vulnerability of it, and not judged, but held and cared for. In the that I felt. And it was such a monumental moment early on in our relationship, where my wife still today is the safest person that I know, not just with me, with everybody. She's the safest person that I know. And it's impossible to show up in her presence and not walk away feeling a little bit lighter, because you can stop pretending in her presence. You can drop the facades in her presence. You can exhale in her presence. And it's just allowed me to show up more full. I thought I knew what authenticity meant until I met my wife. I
Mhm.
thought I knew what freedom felt like before I met my wife. And I often say there was the Caleb that had grown a lot um, before Kara, and then now there's a Caleb that had grown up since Kara. And there are just, another memory that comes to me really quickly is not long after that, we went to her friend's concert. And this was the first time that I was going to meet all of her friends. And so this was like a pretty important night. And we got to this concert, and we're kind of walking around. She's introducing me to people. And then I have this moment of realizing that, the majority of her friends are men. And when they see her, when they see each other, it's not just a, hey, Cameron, how are you? It is a full on hug embrace. And it's just my wife. And a lot of them probably identified as queer. So I just didn't know that at the time. And so, or LGBTQ, and I just didn't know it at the time. And so, okay, cool. And there throughout the whole night, there was this insecurity brewing up, and I started distancing myself from her. She could feel something was up, but her friend is performing. We're gonna be there for the long haul. And I remember getting in the car that night, and anytime I still at this season in my life, anytime I felt that insecurity, I would just drink to try to numb it, and I would just drink to like, I'm just gonna get out of my head and just enjoy the night. So blah, 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 blah. Doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And we got in the car, and I just started badgering her all night. all night, or the whole car ride back home to West Hollywood when I was staying the night with her, and just asking about every guy, every guy, every guy, every guy, every guy. And she just graciously answered, and then we got back to the apartment, and um it was like 1 in the morning, and I still am badgering her. And she gets fed up, and she walks outside, and she is sitting on the back porch, and I walk out there, and I'm like this little boy throwing a tantrum, and I'm just like following her to badger her more. And I don't know what I'm doing until later I realized that like healthy intimacy was never modeled in my family, Cameron. And so nobody ever showed me what it looked like to resolve conflict or how to build intentional intimacy and connection. And so the only way I knew how to build intimacy and connection was I would start a fight, which would allow us to resolve a fight. And then I would feel close to somebody. Start a fight, resolve a fight, feel close. So here I am feeling very disconnected and insecure in our relationship. And I want to feel connected to her. So what better way to do that than to start a fight? And so I was trying to provoke her to fight me. And I'll never forget, man. I was sitting there. I was in my boxer briefs, no shirt on, in the middle of West Hollywood, 2 in the morning, drunk, and or pretty tipsy. And she gets off the couch and she looks at me and she says, "Until you are ready to teach the little boy in you on how to grow up and quit throwing temper tantrums, this relationship is over. In the morning,
Mm.
you get to decide what kind of man you want to be, because I will not tolerate this in my relationship with another man." And I just remember sitting there being, "Huh, huh." And I remember her going to bed, me sitting there and having this full on moment of like, what kind of man do I want to be inside of relationships? Because inside of that relationship, inside of the context of relationships, there wasn't a man present. I was a 6'2" ex NFL linebacker, 35, 36, 37 years old with a 19-inch neck, but there was a little boy running relationships. And this next season of growth, once again, in a very safe container, somebody that would hold clear boundaries and hold me to a higher standard, I got to decide on who I wanted to be. From that moment forward, learning how to do inner child work in the context of my relationships became the utmost priority. I can honestly
Mm.
say from this day forward, that has never happened again. I am not a little boy inside of that relationship, inside of the context of relationships anymore. I am a full grown adult inside of the context of relationships, and it's because of her.
Was that the answer that came that night?
The
What
what?
was the answer that you actually gave in that moment of who do I want to be
Yeah.
inside of this relationship?
Yeah.
Was it to grow up and be a man in a relationship, or was it
I didn't
something else?
see
What
it.
was the words?
I didn't see it then, but I had this moment of saying to
Yeah.
myself, like, I don't want to be this man anymore. Cause that had followed me through every relationship. That had played out in every relationship. And I having this moment of like, I'm going to lose the most special thing I've ever found in my life. I'm going to lose it unless something changes. And so that was like what kind of man do I want to be? I don't want to be like this anymore. And so there was just this moment of like, again, the devotion, right? Like the deep conviction in me of whatever it takes, I'm going to grow. Even if this relationship doesn't last, my future partner, whether it's her or somebody else, doesn't deserve this, does not deserve this. And so it's on me to make that change.
What's interesting there is you knew what you didn't want. You didn't necessarily have an understanding as to what you did by the sounds of it. It was very, very clear as to I do
What I
not
don't
want this
want. Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's
Yeah.
that's all we can grasp
Yeah.
hold of, right? Is that you
Absolutely.
might not have the understanding or the clarity as to where it is that you're going, but you can know I definitely don't want that, right?
Absolutely.
So what happened? What happened the following morning? What was the conversation?
I remember it clearly. There was a conversation of me being like radically honest, um, and taking full responsibility and apologizing and fully recognizing and honoring that I know the damage that I did. And if you need space and time, I will obviously be in agreement with that. But there was just like me being able to explain, I felt so insecure. I was scared of losing you. And so I did the exact opposite of what I should have done. And I did it. I knew I had been doing enough work to see that relational pattern play out where I pick fights, pick fights, pick fights, reconcile the fight, feel close. So I had language around that at the time. And I was able to explain that, which I had not explained to her before because we had never been there before. And so I remember we were in West Hollywood. We went to the beach the following day and just had a really nonchalant, chill day. And it was a good, like, just kind of like, it was a moment of, cool. It's here. It's gone. We're okay. We're okay. And there was a shift in me for sure. And the beautiful part about that experience, Cameron, was I look at every part of my life, like my relationship, with Kara, my relationship with spirit, my relationship with money, my relationship with my work, my relationship inside of community. And we're constantly in relationship with life. So there are different facets of our life, relationships, or in relationship with finances, in relationship with spirit, in relationship to community, in relationship to roles, in relationship to, you name it. I can actively look, and this is what I've been doing over the last probably 12 months, is I've actively looked at every relationship that I hold in my life, and I can feel into that relationship, and I can feel like, is the adult self showing up in this relationship, or is a little boy showing up in this relationship? Like the big growth this year is, the little boy used to show up in my speaking business. Right? The little boy used to show up in the, am I good enough? Is it enough? Do you see me? Like, are you proud? Does it make sense? Like, that's all little boy, like, seeking validation, right? The little boy doesn't show up in my speaking business anymore. And I don't feel that energy anymore. Little boy used to show up in my finances, in my relationship with my finances, and how I stewarded them and how I was in relationship with them. Scared to check my bank account at times, scared to look at my credit card balances, scared. Also spending unconsciously when I'm feeling, vulnerable in life. I don't drink like I used to, so let me go spend money now when I'm feeling vulnerable. So the little boy used to run inside of my finances, and little boy doesn't run my finances anymore. And so offered me like kind of a beautiful framework to look at every avenue of my life and say, hey, who's holding the dominant position inside of this relationship? Is it a little boy, or is the adult Caleb holding the space inside of this relationship? And that's been proved to be like a very valuable self-reflective opportunity for immense growth.
What I like about what you shared with that moment with Kara, the morning after sharing vulnerably, you mentioned you had some language around it
Yeah.
that you were able to share. What that is what you shared earlier, right? It is, I recognize
Yeah.
what is going on. There is
Yeah.
the awareness as to why something's happening. That is a critical part, because otherwise in that situation is, if you don't have the language around it, then how can you possibly change around it? And so what you shared in there was a recognition piece, and then there is the response, right? There is this is what I'm going to do about it, or this is what we are going to do about it. And whether it's in relationship or whether it's in a different area of our lives, when we have an understanding as to why something's occurring in the first place, and we have the language around it, and you have a big enough reason why you're going to do something different, which would then be part of that reframing that would be occurring in the middle part, then that response, the people around you, whether it's in your team or it's your romantic partner or it's your kids or it's your friends, they get to be part of the solution.
Yeah. So good.
Right.
Yeah.
And yes, you might be your responsibility to do the actual work, but they're still part of the journey that you're on. You're not on your own here.
Yeah.
It's almost like there was an element of an ultimatum that was shared at 2 a.m. in the morning. And so either you step up, but it wasn't an insecure response from her,
Truly.
which was what's so
No,
beautiful.
It was not. No.
Right? It was a very secure response. It's like, hey, here's the situation and here's your choice to make. Off you go.
Yep.
And it's your responsibility to go and make
Yep.
that decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is beautiful. And so there's such insight in what you just shared there. How has that shown up over the last number of years then? And has your relationship evolved? Has it changed? Has it grown further as you've had kids? Like, what's that been about? And how has that been for you?
I don't have like many viral pieces of content on Instagram, but the one real viral piece that I have is just a picture or a video of me and Kara in the water in Lake Michigan this summer. And I said, the hardest thing about parenting is not the sleepless nights. The hardest thing about parenting is missing what we once had, and there's such a deep grief that has surfaced over this last season of life. And, I think sometimes people are afraid to acknowledge grief because it feels like, that we don't have gratitude about our kids. Like, no, we fully chose our kids and we feel deep grief on the life that we once had that we no longer have. Both are true and both can exist simultaneously. And so the thing about marriage, I think when you have two committed partners to their own inner evolutions, their own inner growth, is that you are constantly being reintroduced into somebody new, right? I'm constantly learning something new about Kara. I'm witnessing her transformation, and I'm holding space for that transformation. And what that does is for me to look at her and kind of say, oh, I'm no longer in love with who she once was. I'm learning to love who she is today. And so you're constantly surrendering like this outdated love that worked for us in that season. The connection that once worked for us in this season, that season, like the connection that worked for Kara and I when we first met is not a connection that it works for us now. It wouldn't work for us now because life has changed. We've added two kids into the picture. We bought a home. We have built a community. I have a full-time speaking and coaching business. Like there's a lot of stress and pressure on us. And, my kids are 3.5 and 1.5. And so we're in that really interesting season of life where the demands are just a lot. And so I think there has been an utmost priority, for us to continue to say yes to our own inner evolutions and also simultaneously invite each other into that scenario. And so we've evolved, we've grown. Something that we're doing right now, I've never felt at because my son is 1.5 for the last year, my wife has been really in her, unique rites of passage of motherhood. As motherhood is, giving birth is over, she feels like she's giving birth to a new creative inspiration. And she's not just a mom. She's got so many other facets of her life that she's looking to speak life into and to nourish and to grow. There's never been another part of our lives that since we've known each other, where I have felt like we better be so connected together on what we want our futures to look like. For the last 3.5 years, she's been so nose deep and diving deep inside of motherhood that, I've been out speaking and I've been out making money and I've been out doing my thing and I come back and I'm a father and I'm part of our family and we're good. But then it's me going out and speaking. Like I've been the one that has been holding the container, especially financially, for our family as my wife has been just fully consumed by motherhood. And that's what we wanted. That's what she wanted. And that's what we wanted. And we chose that. And I'm great with it. There's not a complaint in me about it. And now we're in this new season of life where we feel, my God, and I think this is a deeper like part of what my soul is asking me for stillness right now. It's like, this isn't necessarily an evolution of expansion inside of Caleb's business. This is like an evolution of expansion inside of the vision of our lives that we have together. And so every morning we meet at the kitchen table at 5:30 in the morning and we get still together, we connect together, we do some journaling practices together, and then we share what the vision of our future looks like. And it's just been this beautiful sacred space. And then we go outside to the fire and we just like we spend time like just tending to this vision of what we want our lives to look like. And so it's offered us such a deeper connection. I've never known my wife to the depth in which I know her now. I've never been more of awe of her as I am it now. I've never honored her like I do now. And so, yeah, it's just birthed such a deeper intensity around the connection that we have today.
How are you going to go about, do you feel, as you go through this phase, making decisions, both of you, that aren't reckless, that are in alignment, that honors each person, that honors the vision that you're creating for each other? Like how are you thinking about that? How are you going to go through the process of actually making the decisions out the other side of what you're going through right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think honestly, again, not trying to skirt the end, I think we do it naturally.
Yeah.
Um,
How?
we tell the truth.
Yeah.
We wholeheartedly tell the truth inside of our relationships. And that's not like, when I say tell the truth, I'm not saying like, well, the truth is this, the truth is that. Like, it's not like that. No, it's like we live, I think our lives, like right now, we were just having a hard conversation about so much of the community that we once feel so close to when we moved from Los Angeles to here. It doesn't feel like that. Our community's been fractured. Like we no longer find life or like we're no longer in relationship with our community like we once were. It just feels incongruent right now. They're not bad people. They're wonderful people. They're lovely people. It just doesn't feel like the season of life that we are in currently right now. And so we told the truth about that. There is an honoring of the different facets and the different parts of our lives that we have outgrown. And we know right now that we're in a very liminal space. We're in a liminal season of life where we're in that in between. We stoke the deep longing and yearning for deeper community with people that feel more aligned with where we are in life right now. And so I think there's just a natural honoring the parts of our lives that we have naturally outgrown, committing to putting in boundaries or separating altogether or doing what we feel like life is asking us to do, and being radically honest about what's surfing for us in the process. My wife told me the other day, I have rhythms in my life, like working out is a priority for me. And so I will wake up pretty early so I can, get around the fire and then I can go and work out. I would miss the first half of breakfast. And, that was building in my wife, and she didn't realize, like, I need you home for breakfast. Like, and there was a little bit of like, I'm like, babe, are we okay? Like, what's going on? And that was a rhythm that worked, 3 months ago. It's just not a rhythm that works right now. And my son is waking up earlier. My daughter is, if you ever meet my daughter, you'll understand why. Like, two parents need to be around first thing in the morning because she goes from 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. And so there was this like, hey, listen, this is what I'm feeling. This was what's on my heart. Like, this is what's happening right now. And I'm like, I see you, honey. Like, yeah, let's make changes. I'll get up earlier, or I will actually change my workout schedule, or whatever it is. Like, yeah. And so I just think there's like a constant, it's not about what works for best for me. It genuinely is like, what's the best for us. And there's a constant willingness to sacrifice and to make necessary sacrifices, or at least to have really hard conversations, intentional conversations around those parts so that we can continue to stay connected at all levels. I think the connection piece is the utmost priority, that we have such devotion to maintaining and enlarging the connection that we have, and anything that threatens or separates that connection, we have conversations around it. And I have found, Karen, that just like naturally allows us to move through the nuances and complexity of these more difficult decisions to make on areas that we want to take our life or what we want to do, to being like, when you're so connected to self, and this is a daily process for me. I'm not saying that like, oh yeah, I'm so connected to, whatever. Um, it just like, I'm shocked at what feels true to me feels true to her, or what feels true to me and not so true to her. Like, oh wow, what a beautiful balancing act. Let's explore this right now. And so that connection, I feel like, is the foundation that we spend most of our time on, that allows us to naturally manage or to move through the more nuanced parts of our lives. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what I went with.
Hey, it's a really really good conversation. We have a rapid fire segment on the show called Your Edge, and
Your Edge.
walks through the components of values, beliefs, and habits. What's your number one value and why?
Is grief a value?
You rock on and do you, man. If it is, what would that look
I
like?
think there's something about, if you feel lost in your life, follow your grief. She'll lead you home. That's been so true to me, that like the depth in which I'm willing to touch my grief really has set the height of the amount of joy that I can experience in my life. And having an apprenticeship with sorrow, with grief, has transformed my life in the most unimaginable ways, and learning how to be present with my grief, to, this sounds so silly, but almost to like allow my grief to have her way with me. She has remade me into a man that I never imagined was possible. There is something to learn in the darkness that you can never learn in the light. And that has transformed my life in the most unimaginable way. But the value that's attached to that, Cameron, is devotion. Devotion. And I mean devotion by like, I cannot not follow the longings of my soul. I was made to say yes to this journey of inner evolution, and it is the utmost priority of my life. And I wrestle with it at times because, again, with a family, as a father, there's like, I want to just be steady and sturdy and safe and secure, but I don't show up as the man I know I'm capable of being, as a father, as a husband, as a spouse, if I'm not fully devoted to pursuing the deeper longings of soul.
There's just a follow up question with that. When did that become the top value? When did devotion shift? Was it that day in 2019, or was it some other time?
As I moved out to Los Angeles, it allowed me to look back at my life and be like, wow, like I don't think I ever fully took into account like what I did. Like you just left the NFL, moved to Canada. You're a graduate of West Point. You became a janitor and you just went full throttle at discovering the deeper complexities of what makes you you. Like you just dove into that well and you never stopped swimming. You know, my this sounds funny, but my astrologist said, like, Caleb, if they told you the secrets of the universe were discovered at the bottom of the ocean, you'd be looking for the oxygen tanks that can get you there, right? Like, you know, like that's just my makeup. And I think as I look back, I'm like, oh, I have been devoted to something bigger than me. You know, Rilke has that beautiful line where he talks about what we fight is so tiny and that makes us small. The point is to be defeated by something so much larger than you. Then we might not need names at all. And I used to fight the things that were tiny. I used to fight against being important. I used to fight against achieving greater success. I used to fight against self doubt and lack of self confidence and insecurity and stress and fear. I used to fight against the things that were so small and it made me small. The point is to be defeated decisively by greater and greater things. Then we would need no names at all. And now I feel like my devotion is, you know, to be defeated by greater and greater things, to be defeated by God, to wrestle with God, to wrestle with source, to wrestle with spirit, to wrestle with longing, to wrestle with desire, and then be defeated by it. This is how we grow. And as we grow in that capacity, we don't need names. And when you look at the importance of that, like we don't need significance. We don't need titles and accolades. We don't need to be known in that way or in that sense that we once used to, right? I just am, and I am more than enough. And I know that because I've wrestled with that.
There might be a belief already in there with what you just shared, but what's the second question is what's a core belief that's really shaped who you've become?
Yeah. To simplify it and to put it very simply, the way up is the way down. I think, you know, I alluded to it earlier. A lot of people are looking to find what they long for, the deeper longings through the familiar path of the upward trajectory, the do more, be more, achieve more, try harder approach. But that deeper thing, it's already within us. So it can only be discovered through an internal descent and it's discovered in the deepening in the descent of our lives. And so, like, the most competitive advantage, I think, in a world that is just like, you know, do more, try more, work longer, work harder, it's like, what does it look like to go deeper? What's the descent look like in your life? And I have followed the descent and the rise, the descent and the rise time and time again. And the descent is, yeah, it's where I find God repeatedly.
Mm. How about a habit, ritual, or a routine that you just can't live without? This could be a daily one, or it could be something you do each year, whatever it is for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my habits, they evolve. Like I don't think I've ever had one that's remained consistent. You know, it kind of evolves, but I alluded to it in this, like right now, stoking a fire is really damn important to me. But something that I love, I do kind of like these soul wanders in nature. And so they're it's not a hike, right? It's like an intentional wander. And what I do is, you know, I go out into wherever I feel like nature is calling me, and I walk until I find a very visible threshold. So maybe it's a stream of water, or maybe it's a tree that has fallen, and I cross over that threshold. And that threshold is the beginning of the wander. And what I love about that is it's like I am hunting soul, and soul is hunting me. And it's like I'm on this quest in nature, and I'm observing the natural elements of nature and allowing them to reflect back to me. And, you know, I'm always like in the wanderings, there is like this. If life is operating by an operating system, like the natural rhythms of life, the more I wander, there is a syncing of my operating system and my rhythm of life with the natural way of moving. And I can tangibly feel that as I have, you know, done these wanders a lot. Anytime I feel like effort and willpower is taking a hold of me, anytime I feel like my life is becoming tense and there's no spaciousness, like it's time to go wander in the woods. And there's so much wisdom. Like I said it earlier, there's no pushing a river. The river's already flowing. Um, nothing in nature resists its own dying. Nothing in nature resists its own dying. We're the only species that resists our own dying. And I'm not talking about the big deaths. I'm talking about the small deaths that we are always entering into to expand what's possible in our lives. No tree is bending over, looking at another tree and being like, wow, I wish I was as cool as that tree. There's no comparison. And more than anything, like everything in nature knows its place of belonging. Everything has a role that serves the larger ecosystem so that it can thrive, regardless of the fires or the freezes or the torrential downfalls. It will always be rebuilt. Everything knows its natural role. And I think our understanding of belonging is so small. Like, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? Where are my people? And I think the deeper question is, where do we belong in the more than human world? Like, what's that? Bill Plotkin calls an ecological niche. Like, what is our contribution that serves greater than just the humanity, but the more than human world? There's a deeper and greater sense of belonging that we're all being invited into that I'm still actively exploring. But there's something about being in nature that helps me engage in the participation of a deeper understanding of understanding my contribution as a species, just like the plants, the bees, the juniper trees, and the streams and the rivers. And there's something there that makes me feel at home unlike anything else.
So good, man. So good. This is a great conversation. Where can people go to find out more?
Yeah, clearly not on social media right now, but
for when you make a when you come back onto social or and wherever else.
Yeah, so my website is
at the fire. Like, go and find them at the fire.
If you're in Nashville, Tennessee, there's going to be a fire. Just come on down and just reach out. But if you wanted to reach out, Instagram is a big one for me. Caleb_Campbell, LinkedIn, Caleb Campbell, and then my website's just calebcampbell.me.
Yes, man. Well, always an absolute pleasure talking, and really appreciate you being on the show, my man.
Thanks for you, man. I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate just who you are.
No, thanks, man. That means a lot. And again, real pleasure. And to those of you listening right now, there's a bunch of things that we'll link to in the show notes, everything that was mentioned at CameronAtlas.com/podcast. Some great guests coming up. So make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment, and until next time, go and write the next line in your story. It could be a giant leap, but it could also be a moment of clarity, a bold decision, or a daily act of discipline that takes you beyond what's comfortable. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on The Edge of Possible.